My name is Serena Okafor, and I want to start by telling you something about the moment before it happened. The moment I walked into that wedding reception hall with my head up, my dress pressed, my gift wrapped, and every single thing I had sacrificed for the last 8 years folded neatly inside my chest like a flag I was finally allowed to carry. I had raised my sister, not in the dramatic, movie of the week sense of that sentence, but in the daily, relentless, unglamorous sense, driving her to school when our mother had one of her episodes, helping her with college applications at 11 o'clock at night after my own 12-hour shifts, co-signing her first apartment because her credit score was a number too small to say out loud, being the person she called at 2 in the morning when her first relationship fell apart, and the person she called at 6 in the morning when she met the man she was going to marry. I had done all of this while working my way through a career that I had built from a single administrative position at a logistics company at age 22 to a regional operations director role at 30. I had done it without a college degree, without a safety net, without anyone co-signing anything for me. I had done it the way things get done when there is no other option, by showing up every day, regardless of what the day felt like. I want you to understand all of this before I tell you what happened at the reception, because the things I just described are the reason what happened at the reception landed the way it did. You cannot understand the weight of a public humiliation without first understanding what the person being humiliated had already carried. The hall was beautiful. Sofia, my sister, had exquisite taste and a new husband named James whose family had the kind of money that allows taste to be expressed without constraint. Round tables with white linen and tall floral arrangements. Chandeliers. A four-piece string quartet during the cocktail hour that was already playing when I arrived. 200 guests distributed across the room with the organized elegance of a seating chart that someone had spent real time on. I found my table. Table 7. I sat down and looked at the name cards arranged around the white linen circle, and I found mine and I read it. It said, Serena Okafor, Sofia's older sister, which was accurate, which should have been fine, except that every other name card at every other table I had passed on the way to table 7 carried a title beneath the name. James's parents, the Ellison family, founders, Ellison Capital. James's sister, Dr. Rebecca Ellison, cardiothoracic surgeon. James's college friends, their companies, their roles, their professional identities printed in elegant italic beneath their names. And mine said, Sofia's older sister. I sat with that for a moment. I set the card down. I smoothed my dress. I told myself it was an oversight. It was probably an oversight. These things happen in the logistics of large events. I know better than anyone. I had planned enough corporate gatherings to understand that details fall through the gaps. Then my mother arrived, and I understood it was not an oversight. My mother, Gloria Okafor, is a woman of great social ambition and selective memory. She remembers the version of every story in which she performed best, and she has retold those versions for so many years that she has come to believe them entirely. She is not a villain. She is not calculating in the way that requires cold intelligence. She is something more complicated, a woman who loves her children and has never once, in 30 years, examined the difference between the love she performed and the love she practiced. She had always favored Sofia. I do not say this as a wound I am reopening. I say it as a documented fact with the same neutrality I would bring to any other documented fact. Sofia was younger, more conventionally beautiful, more socially fluid, easier to take to parties and present to neighbors. I was the serious one, the responsible one, the one who took care of things. These roles had been assigned early and had calcified over time into something neither of us could fully step outside of. What I did not know, walking into that reception hall, was that the seating arrangement had been my mother's doing. James's family had offered to handle the seating chart. They had a wedding planner on retainer. It was a practical offer. Everyone accepted. But my mother had inserted herself into the name card process specifically for our table, specifically for the cards that would represent our family. She had provided the descriptions herself. I learned this later. What I knew in the moment was only what I saw. My mother entering the hall with Sofia's mother-in-law, laughing, already belonging to the room in the way she always managed to belong to rooms when the rooms were impressive enough to want to belong to. She saw me at table 7 and waved the wave of a woman who has placed you exactly where she wanted you and is pleased with the result. I waved back. I was, as I have always been, very good at performing normalcy. The cocktail hour passed. Dinner was served. James and Sofia entered to applause that filled the room with a specific warmth of people genuinely happy for two people genuinely happy. My sister looked extraordinary. She had found a dress that understood her, which is the highest compliment you can pay a wedding gown. James looked at her the way I had always hoped someone would look at her. I felt, in that moment, an emotion so clean and uncomplicated that it caught me off guard. Pure happiness for my sister. After everything. Still pure. Then the speeches began. My mother had asked to give a toast. This was not a surprise. My mother has never in her life been in proximity to a microphone and chosen not to speak. What was a surprise was the content of what she said, because even knowing my mother, even with everything I know about her and have known for 30 years, I had not fully anticipated this. She began warmly. She talked about Sofia's childhood, the specific curated version of Sofia's childhood that existed in my mother's retelling, the one with a nurturing home and abundant opportunities and a mother who had given everything. She talked about James with a transparent approval of a woman who has assessed someone's net worth and found it satisfactory. She talked about the future with the expansive optimism of someone who has never personally been responsible for funding a future. And then she said, "Sofia is everything I always hoped one of my daughters would become. She is educated, she is accomplished, she married well, and she represents this family the way I always dreamed our family would be represented." She paused. She looked directly at me across the room. 200 people were in that hall. Not all of us got there the same way, but Sofia made it. She raised her glass. The room applauded. Not everyone understood what had just happened. The comment was veiled enough that if you didn't know the architecture of our family, you could read it as a general statement about life taking different paths. But the people at table 7 understood. The woman next to me, a colleague of James's whose name I had learned during the salad course, went very still. James's sister Rebecca, 2 tables away, lowered her champagne glass slowly. And Sofia, standing at the head table in her extraordinary dress, went absolutely white. I did not react. I have had 30 years of practice not reacting to my mother. I looked at my champagne glass. I breathed. I told myself what I always tell myself. This is not the moment. This is not the place. I will not become my mother's story at my sister's wedding. I raised my glass with everyone else. I took a sip. I set it down. Then Sofia stood up. Bell, before I tell you what Sofia said, if this story is hitting you somewhere real, please hit that subscribe button right now and ring that bell. Every week on this channel there is a story like this one, about the people who carry everything and ask for nothing. I don't want you to miss a single one. Now, let me tell you what my sister said. She had not planned to give a speech. I know this because she told me afterward, and because I know my sister's face. I've been reading it since she was 4 years old, and the face she made when she stood up was not the face of a woman executing a plan. It was the face of a woman who had just watched something happen and decided, in real time, that she was not going to let it stand. She picked up her glass. She waited until the room was fully quiet. Sofia has always known how to hold a room. It is one of her gifts. She received more of them than I did, and I have never resented her for it. She waited until you could hear the string quartet pause, and the sound of 200 people settling into attention. Then she said, "I want to add something to my mother's toast." Her voice was completely steady. James was looking at her. His hand found hers on the table. "My mother said that I represent the family the way she always dreamed," Sofia said. "She's right that I'm educated. I have 2 degrees. I have a career I'm proud of. I married someone I love." She paused. She looked across the room at me. "But I want this room to know how I got here. Because my mother's toast left that part out." Silence. The kind that has weight. "When I was 15, our father left. My mother, and I say this with love, Mom, because it's true and it matters. My mother was not in a position to keep things together. The bills, the school, the stability. My sister Serena was 22 years old. She had just started her first real job, and she took over. Completely. Without being asked, and without complaining, and without ever making me feel like a burden." Someone in the room made a quiet sound. Not laughter. Something else. "Serena drove me to every school event for 3 years. Serena proofread my college essays, all 7 of them. Serena co-signed my first lease because my credit history was exactly 0. Serena called me every Sunday for 4 years of college, not to check up on me, but because she wanted to. She has never, in my entire life, asked me to acknowledge any of it. She never asked for anything back at all." Sofia's voice was very controlled. Her eyes were bright. "My mother's name card for Serena tonight says, Sofia's older sister." She held up the card. She had taken it from my place setting when I wasn't watching. I didn't know until that moment. "I want to tell this room what it should say." She looked at me directly. 200 people turned to look at me too. "It should say, Serena Okafor, Regional Operations Director. The woman who made sure I had the chance to be standing here tonight. The woman without whom none of this." She gestured at the room, the flowers, James beside her. "All of it would have been possible for me." The room fell dead silent for 1, 2, 3 seconds. Then James Ellison, whose family had Ellison Capital on their name cards, stood up. And he started to clap. He was the first. He was not the last. "I am going to tell you what happened in the next 2 minutes with the same precision I bring to everything because those 2 minutes are what I came here to tell you, and I want to get them right." When James stood and began clapping, his sister Rebecca stood immediately after. The cardiothoracic surgeon, the woman with the impressive name card, who had looked at me with understanding during my mother's toast. Then his parents. Then table after table, not in the choreographed way of people who have been instructed to do something, but in the organic, rippling way of people who have just witnessed something real and want to acknowledge it. I sat at table 7, and I did not move. I will be honest, I did not know what to do with what was happening. I had spent so many years being the person in the background, the logistics, the scaffolding, the person who makes things possible and then stands aside while the thing is enjoyed, that being the subject of 200 people's attention felt like being seen through a window I had always stood behind. Sofia was still standing at the head table. She was crying, which she would hate me for telling you because she is not a person who likes to be seen crying. But she was. And James had his arm around her, and he was saying something to her quietly, and she was nodding. My mother was sitting very still. I have thought about my mother in that moment many times since. What it must have felt like to have aimed something at one daughter and have it answered by the other. To have stood up in front of 200 people and given a toast designed to establish a hierarchy and have the person you'd placed at the top of that hierarchy dismantle it publicly, in her own wedding speech, in front of her new husband's family and every person she had chosen to witness the beginning of her life. I do not know what my mother felt. She is not a person who tells you what she feels. She is a person who performs what she wishes she felt, which is a different thing, and in that moment there was no performance available to her. She sat with her champagne glass, and she was very still, and that was all. I want to tell you about the colleague who had been sitting next to me at table 7, the woman who went still during my mother's toast. Her name was Dr. Adiz Nwosu, an epidemiologist who had gone to graduate school with James and who had been seated at our table because she was, as she explained to me during the salad course, between two worlds at the wedding, close enough to the groom to be invited, not close enough to be placed at the main family tables. She leaned toward me after the applause settled and said, quietly, under the continuing sound of people clapping, "I want you to know that I heard every word your sister just said, and I believe every word of it." She pressed her hand briefly on my arm. It was a small gesture.
It was not a small thing.
There was a moment, about 20 minutes after Sofia's speech, when the dancing had not yet started and people were refilling their glasses, and the room had the particular warmth of 200 people who have just shared something true together, when a man I did not recognize approached my table. He introduced himself as James's uncle, a man in his 60s who had built a construction company from a single truck and 2 employees and who shook my hand with both of his and said, "Your sister told the truth about you tonight. You should know that the people in this room will not forget it." He did not wait for my response. He simply nodded and walked away, and I watched him go and thought about how long I had waited for someone to say something like that and how strange it felt to have it arrive not from the people I had been waiting for, but from a stranger in a good suit at my sister's wedding. The dancing began. I stayed until 11. I danced twice. Once with Sofia, who held my hand the entire song and didn't say anything, just danced, and once with James's father, who was a better dancer than you would expect from a man of his bearing and who told me, at the end of the song, that James had told him about my career and that he was thoroughly impressed, young lady, thoroughly. I thanked him. I meant it. I had spent so many years building something that only I could see clearly, and the experience of having it suddenly visible to a room full of people was something I am still, months later, processing in layers. Sofia came to me before the first dance. She walked across the room in her extraordinary dress, and she took both my hands and she said, "I should have done that years ago. I'm sorry it took tonight." "You didn't need to do it at all," I said.
"Yes, I did," she said.
"I really, really did."
She squeezed my hands.
"And Serena, I need you to know that the name card was not me. I didn't see the seating arrangement until an hour before the ceremony. When I saw your card, I told James, and he said we'd address it tonight. That was his idea, actually. Standing up first. He planned it." I looked across the room at James Ellison, who was accepting a glass of something from a server and talking with his father, and I thought, my sister married exactly the right person. I did not speak to my mother at the wedding. Not because I decided not to. I did decide clearly and specifically that the wedding was not the place for that conversation, but also because she left before the dancing began. Her chair was empty when I looked for her during the first dance, and it was still empty an hour later. And when I texted my cousin to ask where she'd gone, he said she had a headache and called a car. She called me the next morning at 8:45. I was having coffee in the hotel room I'd booked for the night, watching the morning light come through the curtains, still processing the previous evening in the slow, methodical way I process most things. I let it ring. She called again at 9:15. I let that ring too. At 9:40, she sent a text that said, "I want to explain what I meant last night. Call me when you can." I put the phone face down and finished my coffee. I want to be clear about why I didn't answer because it would be easy to frame it as anger, and it was not only anger. It was something more deliberate than that. I had spent 30 years being available to my mother on her timeline, in her terms, at the pace she set. I had answered when she called and explained when she demanded explanation and absorbed when she distributed blame and managed when she generated chaos. And I had done all of this while simultaneously doing everything I described at the beginning of the story, the driving and the applications and the co-signing and the 2 a.m. calls. Not answering the phone was not a punishment. It was a practice. The practice of existing on my own timeline, in my own terms, at my own pace. It was the thing I had watched Sofia do the previous evening from the head table, simply declining to let someone else's narrative be the final word. And it was a thing I was, for perhaps the first time, doing for myself. I called Sofia instead. She answered on the second ring, sounding exactly as tired and as happy as a person should sound the morning after their wedding. "How are you?" I asked. "Perfect," she said. "Absolutely perfect. James made me breakfast. He made actual eggs." A pause. "How are you?" "I'm good," I said. And I realized saying it that I meant it. "I'm really good." I spoke to my mother 10 days later. In person, at her house, over the tea she makes when she wants a conversation to feel civilized. I had chosen 10 days because I needed 10 days, not to cool down, but to arrive at the conversation with the same precision I bring to any situation where the outcome matters. She tried, first, to explain. The speech had not been meant as a slight. She had simply been expressing pride in Sofia's accomplishments. She had not intended the comparison. The name card was not her doing. She had only provided information. She had not known how it would be formatted. I let her finish. I did not argue with any of it. I have learned at 30 that arguing with my mother's explanations is a closed loop. The explanations are not designed to be accurate. They are designed to survive the conversation, and they are very good at it. When she finished, I said, "I heard you. I want to tell you something in return, and I'd like you to listen the way I just listened to you." She nodded. "I am 30 years old," I said. "I have been the load-bearing wall of this family since I was 22. I have done it without being asked and without complaint because I love Sofia and because someone had to. I have never once asked you to acknowledge it because I did not think acknowledgement was something you were capable of giving, and I did not want to spend my life waiting for it."
She started to speak.
I held up one hand. "Last night, at my sister's wedding, in front of 200 people, you told the room that Sofia represented the family the way you always dreamed. You looked directly at me when you said it. Whether you meant it the way it landed or not, it landed. And I need you to know that it landed, and that I am telling you it landed not so that you'll apologize, but so that you will understand that I am no longer going to be the person who absorbs things silently and keeps the peace. I'm done with that. I will still be your daughter. I will still be present. But I am not going to keep swallowing things so that you can keep not seeing them." Silence. The kind my mother uses when she is deciding which version of herself to be. Then she said, and this surprised me, because it was more honest than most things she had ever said to me, "I didn't know how to talk about what you did without making myself look small." I looked at her. She was looking at the tea. "What I did," I said carefully, "made you look like a mother whose daughter stepped up when things were hard. That's not small. That's the opposite of small." She didn't say anything else for a while. I didn't push. I drank my tea. Before I left, she said, "I'm sorry, Serena." It was quiet, and it was plainly produced, and it was the most unperformed thing she had said to me in as long as I could remember. "Thank you," I said. "That's a start. I want to tell you about James's sister because she is the part of this story I did not expect, and she is, I think, the part that is most important for what my life looks like now." Dr. Rebecca Ellison sent me a LinkedIn message 3 days after the wedding. It said, "I watched what happened at my brother's wedding with a great deal of attention. I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon. I run a team of 14 people. I have been looking for a new operations director for 6 months. If you're open to a conversation, I would genuinely like to have one." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I laughed. The real kind, the kind that comes from a place that is surprised and a little undone by the specific shape that life sometimes takes. I wrote back, I would like that very much. We met for coffee 2 weeks later. Rebecca Ellison is, I can tell you from direct experience, exactly the kind of person whose name card should say Dr. Rebecca Ellison, cardiothoracic surgeon, not because the title is impressive, though it is, but because she inhabits it with the particular quality of someone who has earned something and knows what the earning cost. She asked me smart questions. I gave her honest answers. We talked for 3 hours, and at the end she said, I think you're exactly what my department needs. I'd like to make you an offer. The offer was, in specific numbers, 40% above what I was currently making. I did not negotiate. I have learned to recognize when a number is already right. I took the position. I started 3 months after the wedding. I will not tell you it has been easy, because any new role at a higher level than you have previously held requires a period of proving yourself that is not comfortable. But I will tell you that Rebecca is the kind of leader who makes you want to be better, not through pressure but through example, and that I have learned more in these 3 months than in the previous 3 years. My name card at the Ellison Medical Group holiday party read, Serena Okafor, Director of Operations. I took a photograph of it. I have not sent it to anyone. I didn't need to. Sofia and James came back from their honeymoon to an apartment I had helped them move into. This was before the wedding, a contribution I had offered, and they had accepted with the grace of people who understand that help is love made practical. We have dinner, the 4 of us, once a month. James makes something ambitious and occasionally disastrous and always edible. Rebecca has come twice. She and Sofia have developed the particular friendship of 2 women who recognize each other's competence from a distance and want to examine it more closely up close. My mother comes to about half of these dinners. She is different with me now, not transformed. I would not overstate it. But different. There is less performance in how she speaks to me. She asks about my work with what appears to be genuine curiosity rather than the polite adjacent interest she previously deployed. She told me once, quietly, standing in Sofia and James's kitchen while James narrated his cooking process at full volume, I should have put your title on the card. I should have found a way to put all of it on the card. You should have, I agreed. I didn't know how to be proud of you without being ashamed of myself, she said. I thought about that for a long time afterward. It is, I think, the most honest thing she has ever said to me. It is also, in its own way, a kind of answer to the 30 years I spent wondering why the work I did was never enough to earn visible recognition, not because the work was invisible, but because seeing it required her to see also the years during which she had needed it to exist, and that was a harder thing to look at. There is something I discovered about myself in the months after that conversation in my mother's kitchen, and it is something I want to be honest about, because I think it matters. I had expected that getting the apology would feel like a completion, that the thing I had been carrying would set itself down when the words were finally said. What I found was different. The apology mattered. It genuinely mattered. But it did not undo 30 years. It simply acknowledged them, which is a related but separate thing. The carrying had been real. The cost had been real. An acknowledgement is not a refund. It is, at best, a receipt, confirmation that the transaction happened, that the price was paid, that someone finally looked at the bill. What I have come to understand is that the work I did for my family was not diminished by the fact that it was not publicly acknowledged for 30 years. A bridge does not become less structural because no one commissioned a plaque for it. It held what it held while it was holding it, and the held things are real. Sofia's degrees, Sofia's career, Sofia's extraordinary dress at her wedding, and the way James looked at her, and the life they are building in the apartment I helped them move into. Those things exist. My work is in the foundation of all of them. A name card cannot change that. My mother's toast cannot reach it. The only thing that could have erased it would have been me choosing not to do it, and that was never a choice I was going to make, because Sofia needed it done, and I was the one who could do it. I've been asked since the wedding by several people who know the story whether I regret not standing up for myself sooner. Whether I wish I had said, at any point in the previous 8 years, the things I said in my mother's kitchen over tea. My answer is always the same. I said what I said when I had the standing to say it, and when saying it could produce something real. There are moments when speaking up changes nothing except the satisfaction of having spoken, and there are moments when speaking up creates a new reality. I have always been better at identifying which moment is which than at managing the waiting in between. The waiting, I think, will always be the hardest part for me. But I am learning. I have not fully resolved how I feel about my mother. I do not think I am required to. She is my mother and I am her daughter, and we are in the early stages of a version of that relationship that is based on something more honest than the one we had before. It is not warm yet, but it is real, and real is the foundation. I have thought in the months since that wedding about the name card, the specific cruelty of it, which was so perfectly calibrated to make me feel invisible in a room full of people with visible identities, and also the specific irony that the thing designed to erase me was the thing that led to Sofia's speech, which was the thing that led to Rebecca's message, which was the thing that led to the name card at the holiday party that said exactly what I had earned and nothing less. You cannot design a path to justice. You can only refuse to accept injustice as the final word. What Sofia did at that head table was not a plan. It was a reflex, the reflex of someone who had spent years being the recipient of a person's care and had finally reached the moment where silence would have felt like a betrayal of everything that care had cost. She stood up because sitting down would have required something of her character that she was not willing to give. What James did, standing first, starting the applause, was something I think about more than I expected to. He did not know me well that night. We had shared perhaps 6 dinners and 2 holiday gatherings and several phone calls with Sofia present. He had no personal debt to repay. He stood up because it was the right thing to do, and because he is the kind of person who does the right thing when given the opportunity, regardless of cost. My sister chose correctly. And what Rebecca saw, across a reception hall, from 2 tables away, was a person. Not Sofia's older sister. Not the family member, without the impressive title. A person whose quality was visible even when the room was organized to obscure it. That is the thing about quality. You can arrange name cards to minimize it. You cannot arrange a room in such a way that it disappears entirely. People like Rebecca look for it anyway, and they find it. I am 30 years old. I am the director of operations at Ellison Medical Group. I drive myself to work in a car I own, to an apartment I pay for, to a life that is entirely mine. I have a sister who stood up at her own wedding to say my name correctly in front of 200 people. I have a mother who is learning, slowly and imperfectly, to see me. I have colleagues who respect my work and a boss who challenges me and a monthly dinner where someone makes something ambitious and the room is full of people who know exactly who everyone at the table is. The name card said, Sofia's older sister. The room found out who I actually was anyway. Some truths don't need a name card. They just need someone willing to stand up and say them out loud. That was Serena's story. And if it stayed with you, if you've ever been the person who carried everything and watched someone else take the credit, you are not alone. Drop a like if this story moved you. It takes 1 second, and it tells the algorithm that this story deserves to be heard by more people. Subscribe and ring the bell. Every week there is a new story on this channel about women who were underestimated and exactly what happened next. And leave a comment. Have you ever had someone else speak up for you when you couldn't speak for yourself? Or have you ever been the one who stood up?
Tell me.
I want to hear your story.
See you in the next one.